Good morning. It is Saturday, October 29th, 2022. My name is Barbara With, and you are here with me and the party, a rather expansive group of souls in the afterlife who have been working with us for world peace and to help us birth this new humanity that is built upon compassion. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about war. So trigger warning. But these are the kinds of conversations we need to have right now. What's going on in the world, how you feel about it, what we can do about it, if anything. And then, oddly enough, connected to that topic is talking about detachment. And for these things, I'm going to read a little bit from Party of 12, the Afterlife Interviews, an interview I did in 1998 with Jesus of Nazareth. That will be very interesting. And then on that practical application of detachment, we're going to look at conflict revolution, the process, and how much detachment is such a part of a healthy domain that we can create for ourselves. So I'm glad you're here. And let's go talk to the psychic sorority. Welcome to the party. How is everyone?
Good. You?
Very good.
So it's good to hear Heike say that after all stuff that's going on there.
Yeah.
Are things better?
No, it's getting worse and worse, but I'm just keeping up my good mood and going outside and enjoying the yellow leaves and a little bit sunshine and a little bit fresh air and just
rise above it. Good for you.
thinking about something else. So otherwise you have to shoot yourself.
Yes, we don't want you to do that.
No, I don't want me to do that either.
Oh, good for you.
I was thinking about something you'd said in our last group about detachment, about when we detach from things. It was like this vision of actually we're attached to the energy and we're holding all that energy. And then when we detach, it actually frees it up to then do its job, its flowy manifestation job. And that got me thinking about detachment and why it's so important for our self-love, for our self-care.
The big dictionary time.
By the way, you look so lovely with this violet color. It's really beautiful on you.
Thank you. I love it too.
Really wonderful.
Detach. The interesting part of the definition of detach, to separate, usually without violence or damage. I thought that was such a twist to the definition of detachment. I hadn't thought about having to detach violently and then doing damage. I guess that's really not detachment.
No.
Yeah, to disconnect. And then detachment, the act or process of disconnecting or detaching, separation, the state or condition of being separate or apart, dissociation from surroundings, the concerns of others, or worldly affairs, the absence of prejudice or bias. I started thinking about that in terms of what's been going on in the world this week. And I think what pushed me to the edge of wanting to have this conversation with you guys was watching this report about how the US has about 25 days worth of diesel fuel.
Wow.
And I don't know if it's true. The source that I heard it from is somebody who is slanted, but wouldn't be someone just to make something that big up. What is going on over there? I'm hearing all kinds of things about. They're anticipating many deaths from the winter and no fuel. I assume Heike, Norway is okay with fuel.
Yeah, it's very, very expensive. All gasoline is really, really rising and very expensive, and the wood prices are rising. So every burning material for the winter, the prices are rising. So that's it. But I think we are doing fine. So it's we have enough woods and we have enough fuel and everything is enough still, but the prices are very high. And the prices are also very high for food and all other things. So it's almost 30% more expensive for the food. So it's really, really on the way up. So it's scary in a way. For me, it doesn't matter because I'm alone, and for the people with children and families and a lot of loan and everything, it's really scary and yeah, it's not easy.
Same here, not 30% on food, but certainly up 20%, 18. And gas has gone up to about $1.75 a liter. Does that compare to you?
Yeah, we go by liters and it's $2.60 for a liter.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's unbelievable. So it's double the price of your price. So it's unbelievable high. I think almost $3 is really, really high. So it's
so times 4. You go by gallons in the States, right?
yeah.
So times 4 is what you're paying, and I'm paying. They're saying it's going to go back up to 2. It was over 2 in July, so 2. That was about $8 a gallon.
I guess I'm also seeing that the troops are amassing at the borders from on each side. Apparently, Putin made this speech about his vision of the world. His vision for the world was actually not something I could disagree with. And I thought about how much the United States has been just fueling this fire, just completely fueling this fire. And I have to detach. How much can we take on individually of these things? However, I suppose if the United States runs out of diesel fuel in 25 days, a lot of things come to a close that we've sort of been anticipating in some way, I guess, the fall of the empire, but
Yeah.
watching it actually go down it's really breathtaking, and it certainly must be a come to Jesus moment for every human.
A lot of sources are talking about an upcoming civil war in the US. Do you see that too? Or
I think they're driving it when the president comes out and says half the countries are terrorists because they voted for Donald Trump. You know that they're trying desperately to push us into, which only makes me all the more not going to do that.
yeah,
Like,
of course.
Yeah. I guess being detached sometimes feels, not that there's something wrong. Maybe it's because I do care. I really do. Here's the example. Okay. There's a governor's race in Wisconsin right now. That is one of the scariest ones yet, because the guy who's running against the Democrat, who I don't love any of them, but he already has a contract with Enbridge Oil to build the pipeline through the Pinocchio Hills where I live. He's already signed the contract with the oil corporation, who has now been charged with felonies in the past 2 weeks. And so if he wins, he just dismantles the DNR and they just do whatever they want. And my friend is in the hospital because of this.
I think that's a problem. Resistance is not the way, right? When you're focusing on the problem, you're energizing the problem. So the detachment allows you to allow it. You don't want, you don't have to like it, far from it. But I wonder what neutrality, how that compares to the definition of detachment, because to remain neutral is to allow everybody their own path, and as horrific as it looks, we know that's not the whole picture. We know there's a bigger picture that we have access to. That is what we're focusing on, just getting through this chaotic time, which is why we came, everybody says.
And that is one of the definitions of detachment, the absence of prejudice or bias.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. It got me thinking, all of this kinds of conversation about my own condition in the winter, the what ifs. What if the fuel oil runs out? My heating systems are propane. So if that's gone,
Do you have a wood stove there?
I don't. I have a propane stove, and then I have propane in-floor heat.
But you don't actually have a wood stove or fireplace in your
It's
house?
it's a propane fireplace.
But it should be easy to switch it out against a wood stove, and then you can even prepare the food on the wood stove if you go out for electricity and gas.
Yeah, and I live in a community where if there's any place to be with the people here who have been ready as much as we can be for it together as a community. That's really been important here.
Pioneers. Back to the pioneer.
I was just going to say to Heike, when you were, going through this, maybe it has to get so bad, because you were saying it's getting worse. Maybe it just has to get so bad until people finally start producing or generating some genuine solutions. And I feel that way about our predicament. We've been exploiting the earth. We have not been taking care of the earth. There are alternatives out there, but we've been prevented from using these methods. And so, maybe it just has to get so bad. Maybe people have to start dying and starving, and I hate to say that, until we finally, as a collective, say, okay, no more of this. Let's start doing what works.
Years ago in one of the channels, Einstein said, you will all have your own little box, Tesla technology, that will, take care of all of your needs, your homes, your cars. And I'd been reading about Tesla, what a life he had, all that information, exactly what you said, Debbie. It's been suppressed because it hasn't been profitable for whoever's making all the profits.
JP Morgan, yep.
But it's there, and there are lots of people working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but I agree too that everything has to really blow up, I think. Not literally maybe, but everything has to come to a head.
I can't see where the United States is going because it's really off the deep, deep end. I mean, we've just gone off the deep, deep end. And the most we can do, I think, is to what we're doing. We're birthing this new humanity, which was when I asked this morning, it's like, what do we do? And the answer was to focus on the birthing process. What it did was it made me remember a part in Party of 12, the Afterlife Interviews, in the interview with Jesus of Nazareth. I went for the passage that I thought I wanted to read, and conveniently there was already a marker in a different passage. This is when I heard focus on the birthing process. It's like, remember what you're doing. You're changing the infrastructure of the human species from that of fear-based to based in compassion. Compassion as the fifth fundamental force of the universe, which is what's at the root of what we're made up of. We're made up of compassion. This is what I wanted to remind us of. And I'm going to read this passage. This is when we had asked Jesus, what are the roots of this long-lived feud in the Middle East? Because in Party of 12, the Afterlife Interviews, we also had Anwar al-Sadat, who was the head of Egypt, who was assassinated, but who went and had peace with Israel. And so Jesus was asked, what are the roots of this lifelong feud in the Middle East? And he said, to understand, you have to go back to the beginning of the emerging consciousness. Picture a large tribe of humans just beginning to be self-aware, learning to live together, acquainting themselves with the environment. Their biggest challenge is survival, fighting for their lives against the elements, creating shelter, securing food. The major condition dominating their instincts is fear. fear of the environment, fear of the unknown, fear of the darkness, fear of the light, such as fire and lightning, fear of annihilation. Quite simply, self-awareness came with the fear born of suddenly awakening in a harsh, unknown environment. This is the most primal root of all fear within humanity. This is the condition that the story of Adam and Eve tried to depict, only there was no evil serpent. They weren't thrown out of the garden. It was the growth of humankind being directed by the divine intelligence of compassion, prodding consciousness awake to become self-aware. It's also the story of every human birth, as you leave the watery womb and enter the hard, cold reality of space-time. The separation from the oneness is at first terrifying, but the degenerative concept of something evil luring you into temptation of sin only serves to undo the progress made towards ridding the infrastructure of fear. To counterbalance the fear, within this emerging human was installed a heart, to feel, to mourn, to celebrate, to laugh, to be connected to the inner source of eternal consciousness, the wellspring of life. Emotions were intended to be in each individual's one-to-one connection to his or her source. Emotions were also the great equalizer. Everyone in the tribe received the capacity to feel, and conversely, the capacity to deny those feelings. The new human also had an intellect, which was to be used to define the new images and experiences of the new awareness. This ability to define perception was part of a kind of sonar system. As emotions in their new bodies picked up information from the source within, messages were then sent to the intellect, a series of descriptions of what was being experienced from without. These descriptions were then created a third dimension of intuition. This voice was the combination of both the emotion and the intellect, and provided the most advantageous step for humans to take. Intuition was a more highly evolved form of instinct and was an inner compass, keeping the human safe and providing unity with the other two emerging dimensions of emotion and intellect. As the intellect began to define what was perceived, these newborn creatures of consciousness started to organize, much like cellular activity on molecular levels. Different members of the tribes began to identify with one element outside themselves or another. At first, they gravitated towards nature's elements, water, wind, wood, and fire. This division was meant to develop diversity. From the infrastructure of fear, however, it became a part of separatism. Nature soon gave way to thought, and thought's ability to conquer nature. These new thoughts evolved into associative language coalitions, people attracting and gathering because of similar definitions of what was being perceived. Those who were afraid of lightning and believed it was the wrath of an angry god all rallied together. They separated themselves from those who believed otherwise. Then came the symbols, the flags, the emblems, the coats of arms, symbols to rally under kinship. The differences were sometimes celebrated and embraced, but more often than not, it became about which one was right. One type of associated language group was religion. Within the different religion groups, there emerged different people who could scribe God's words. These prophets were separated from the rest of the tribe, who had a special power to talk directly to God. The rest of the group then began to listen to the words of the scribe instead of listening to their own connection, to their own source. No one realized that the words from the scribes were available to everyone in the tribe. In this way, separation from self began to take place within the individuals of the groups as well. Entire structures of government, religion, politics, most all organizations of associations were built around this primal perception of fear and separation. Because of this, your entire culture is programmed to manifest from a fear-based infrastructure. That helped me go, oh, this is what we're doing. We are birthing a new humanity that is based on this compassionate infrastructure. And like you said, Debbie, maybe it takes people getting so destroyed, that they wake up or awaken in the process. I know that for me, in my personal transformation, it took that. It took losing everything to regain.
I love the idea of holding the compassion, and that could be interpreted as, I think they call it spiritual in passing, where, you just, I'm just going to think positive and, but we know also the process of feeling that fear, within ourselves. And as that process described, how then that's when the intuition will tell us what to do as far as the next best step for the good of the whole. Yeah, I think both of those processes are necessary to hold the compassion for ourselves, especially, and the world, but processing that fear within us and for the world.
It's hard giving birth, but it's so worth it in the end, eh? It's harder to stay and do this work than to die, even though dying seems really like the worst thing to us many times.
So I do feel like we're dying. We're going through a process of death and destruction, and in order to do that birthing.
When I was at my worst, I used to go to bed and say, if I'm never going to feel better than this, don't let me wake up. So every morning I woke up, I thought, okay, I'm going to feel better than this at some point.
That's good.
Inch your way along.
Yes.
I heard a clip from Martin Luther King the other day talking about building a society basically based on the good of the whole. This is what we need to do. We need to build a society where people are making decisions for the good of the whole. What I like about this and the practicalness of our work is that it boils down to, at such a root level, these three parts of ourself. To make a decision for the good of these three parts of self, to begin with, just to start with, not having to do with anybody else in the room or in the conflict, just that. In conflict resolution, detachment is actually a very important concept to grasp, along with the trigger, which is not just the thing that triggers us, but the emotion that gets triggered, whatever that is, the anger or the sadness, or you can be triggered in the good way too, but usually in conflict, it's the uncomfortable way. And then projection, which is when we're assigning the source of our feelings to somebody else or to a situation or putting it out there. Also, projection is when we project our judgments onto ourselves. We're projecting our judgments onto ourselves. So detachment means letting go of those projections, whether you're projecting onto somebody else or you're projecting onto yourself, and revolve everything 180 degrees back to self. I like that definition about doing it without damage, doing it as a compassionate act of self-responsibility to make sure that we're making decisions for the good of the whole.
But I'd like to ask a question. So when we are trying to stay in this space of compassion and good of the whole, with what it looks like we are all going to be being faced with, and different scenarios probably for each of us, how do I not be upset with those who choose to just continue on in the way they are when I am working to try to be in this place of compassion? How do we do that if things really, really fall apart here?
So look at your trigger. What is it that's triggering you about what's going on? Put it in a sound bite. What is it that actually is bothering you? And then as Barbara just explained, because that's a type of projection, and that we do, to get upset at somebody else because they're possibly, I don't know, I'm putting it in my own words, doing something that you think that they should be doing something else. Well, where are you doing that within you? And that's the only place you can make that change. That will just give you more insight into you, because maybe there are little areas that the world or whatever your external world is it wants you to see, so that you can turn that around and just say, well, where is it within me that I'm perpetuating this type of behavior? How is that for conflict resolution?
Excellent. And it does, just to piggyback off that, I think it does become, for me, it has to be like a daily, every single morning thing to have that awareness at every level. And when I find myself getting ticked off, and we talk about this because I don't say anything, I just sit here and go, and then this part of me emerges and goes, well, it's a daily process.
Very much been a daily, more than just a daily. It's multiple times that I am very much aware of my frustration or whatever, and trying to figure out. I like things maybe more structured and more orderly, and maybe that's what's going to happen here when all the systems break down, because there isn't going to be any order. When it comes down to survival, I'm not afraid of what might happen here. I grew up being able to survive and take care of myself, and not from a standpoint of being abused, by the way. Just my growing up on a farm. My family they weren't rich farmers. We were just a little farm, but I learned a lot. I'm not in as much fear, but I think what's bothering me right now is that I think a lot of people aren't thinking their way through some of the consequences of changing instantly, because there's going to be a lot of people that aren't prepared. There are. What are people going to do that are living in apartment buildings? It's different than each of us that has a home. We have our own space to be in, but there's a lot of people that space is maybe going to be quite compromised. That's probably part of what's going to happen here.
So how can you be more prepared within yourself for something that might occur? Because you can't help everybody get prepared. Where is it within you that will help you feel better prepared? For me, myself, I have gone through this very same thing that you're explaining. And I have to just go back within and go, you know what? I have my intuition, bring it on. If something happens, I'm going to go within and feel that angst or whatever it is that, the emotion that it brings on. And I'm going to know what the next best step is. I mean, to me, I can't be given a better gift than that. I don't have to have anybody helping me, telling me what to do. Or, it may be the process, they may come into my life or I'll attract them but my intuition is what will tell me. And so I feel prepared for anything because I have that. And we all do, but we don't all realize that because we're so trained and programmed to, somebody else has to tell us what the best thing to do is. And but no, we have that within us.
I think where I am in conflict with myself right now is staying in compassion for people, for others who maybe aren't going to be compassionate with those around them.
And it starts with you being compassionate.
To stay in that compassion is a challenge.
Yeah, always for yourself first. That's where it all starts. That will spill out into your experiences and what you see others doing. And so just keep that compassion for you. Just burn that bright within you.
But this is maybe too where detachment comes in.
And I want to say, not getting caught up in the stories, like, again, Heike, I'll use your example at work, it's so easy, I'm sure, for you to get, caught up in those stories, and that's where we have the intellect, just running amok. So to detach and just go, well, I'm just okay. And I'm just going to have compassion for, what's going on. But it's actually the detachment from that intellect and stories.
What helps me sometimes is that I think all people come from different places and they have different experiences and they have lived different lives before, and we don't know anything about them and their experiences and their lives, and we don't know anything about their intentions, how they came into this life, with what they want to experience. Maybe they want to experience to die in an apartment of hunger. Maybe that's their choice. We don't know that. We can try to help them, and I can try to raise awareness around me. But if I only meet deaf ears, and that's what I am meeting, then I think it's their experience. They have the right to choose what they want to experience. And if they want to live like that, okay, then I make my choice out of my experience. And that what helps me sometimes, because sometimes I'm very impatient. I'm a little bit explosive. I think as a surgeon, we have to be like that. But it doesn't make it easier to connect with other people if you explode and explode into their faces. It doesn't make a good conversation, actually. And they choose like I choose. I choose my path. I choose how aware I want to be. And they have the right to choose themselves. And if they want to die, okay, please die. So maybe they have to go into another life and do a different experience. I don't know. We don't have the whole picture. And sometimes just to step back and say to myself, Heike, you don't have the whole picture. Maybe they are fighting for the good of all in their way without me understanding it, because I don't have the whole picture. I think in this Party of 12 book of yours, Barbara, there was some channeling of Adolf Hitler, and there was something about the Jews before they came into their lives. They made an agreement with Hitler to be guest, to teach them a lesson in the life, and it sounds completely crazy, but we don't have the whole picture, and we don't have their intentions, and we don't have their life plan, and sometimes it's good to remind yourself. At least for me, it helps me to remind myself that I don't have the whole picture. Maybe it's their task to live exactly the way they live.
And this is the absence of bias, the absence of judgment. You know, we can't judge other people. So there's that detachment again, where we stay out of the head. We just have compassion for whatever it is that they're going through. We wish them the very best, and staying detached like that.
Don't you think that often the worst circumstances help people discover aspects of themselves and rise above? Or not, but sometimes, yes. I think focusing on that is better, that people will wake up, more people will wake up, and yay. Or if they don't, that, like you say, that's a choice, and that could be a long time in the making. I certainly heard that same thing about Hitler and the Jews, that was a kind of a karmic reconciliation for their part in the fall of Atlantis. And that Hitler was a thought form or whatever, like a
Exactly.
Back to my friend who's driving herself into the ground because there's these things outside herself, the governor's race, that could just spell disaster, and yet she's sick. She's ruining her health. Her stress levels are over the roof. What good is that attachment? And I don't feel one bit guilty that I'm not freaking out if this horrible man gets elected and they push a pipeline through the hills. I'll have emotion about it, but that's not going to rob me of my self-love and my everything I've worked for through my life. One thing I wanted to say, Lynda, too, was that you've talked several times about wanting things to be more organized. I take it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that in this scenario, then there's somebody who's not organized, who's somehow affecting your organization.
Yes, I'm wanting to let go of that need to be organized. It is actually a recurring pattern in my life with various people and family members. So it is not something that is just right now. It's maybe that's just why I came into this incarnation, was to learn how to let go of all this, that I'm finding it very difficult.
Something that has helped me in the past few weeks and will continue to is, especially after our conversations a few weeks ago about letting go, is that every chance I get, it's like the reoccurring mantra of watching myself and watching myself get caught up in something and should this, and then like, no, let go, and taking that time, doing those breaths, just little bits at a time. Okay, here's where I'm getting frustrated because there's not organization. Okay, just let go of it. It's cumulatively building, I think, and also becoming more habitual. Then it comes the creative solutions of how you're going to reframe the disorganization. Even though I'm an organized person, I can have a choppy, random energy that I don't want to impose upon anyone, but I can understand having somebody in your space or in your life that doesn't have that organization. But there's a certain organization to that. It's not what you think organization is, but it's a certain way they organize with their energy for whatever reason.
It's good to remember that chaos is the norm. Chaos is the default. In nature, everywhere, like, nature doesn't make little plots of grass for us to cut or anything. Like, everything is all together, no vacuums, everything is, working together. And the thing is, the picture is so much bigger than we can see, like you say, Heike, that. And I think being in nature is such, like you said earlier, Heike, for me, the same. If something's not working well, go outside. Just go outside, even the backyard, and deadhead the plants, or just go and look at the leaves, or walk by the water, or whatever. Water is always good, of course.
Maybe it's why nature is the norm, or chaos is the norm. Maybe we learn it best in nature.
Because we still have no control over it.
Not really.
Yeah. Well, should we do a little channel?
Sure.
Right. Let's all settle in to where we each are. Slow down your breath. Slow everything down. Slow down your thinking processes. Reduce the fluctuating waves in your mind. Move the emotion with each breath. And between the two is the voice of God within you. That is the voice that we are basing this new humanity on. The voice of God within each individual. We will command that only the most divine light shine down upon us as this time, and the greatest good be present here. What is that greatest good? What does that mean? And why is it so important right now? Because everything that you do right now in this world where there is so much change taking place in every single human on the planet. No one is being overlooked. Whether they deal with it in this way or that way is totally up to them, just like how you deal with it is totally up to you. And this is that lesson plan that humanity has been waiting for. It is that opportunity to stop looking outside of self as if there is some authority or source any greater than the voice of compassion within each individual. Compassion, by its very nature, impels the creation of physical matter one step at a time for the good of the whole creation. By its programmed nature, that's what humans are made up of. Even though in the lens where you're sitting in your physical body, you have the potential to either be Hitler or Jesus and everything in between. It is this awakening process that is meant to have you use your free will to pick up your decision-making power, to understand what it means to make decisions for the good of the whole, and commit your life to that basic perspective. That truth that when you work for the good of the whole, you activate the synergy of all of the parts. If the three parts are fighting, you don't get synergy. When you look at your world today, that when leaders, nations, countries, armies, deep state, whoever is working in that arena of the world right now doesn't work for the good of the whole, they create a potential to exponentially remove all of life from the planet. And what we want you to do is feel yourself anchored in that compassion every single day. Feel yourself anchored in it. And that's why. Because when you, who can, connect, you activate the synergy. When you're fighting amongst each other, when you're projecting on someone else, when you're making judgments of someone else, you're diminishing the synergy and you're turning things towards the Hitler end of the spectrum. It's just a little bit, those judgments, those projections, just a little bit, but that opens the door. That's why you can be a holy person in this day and age, by being committed to working for the good of the whole, starting with yourself. That means learning that you have to be your own authority. And that's a lot of retraining of the intellect. You can release the emotions around it. It's reframing the intellect to be able to let go of everything. That's the power in that detachment. That power, combined with your own self-awareness, your own intention, visualization, and then manifestation, that's your mission here. And you are given lessons and opportunities that fit your life. So Lynda, for example, you have your triggers that are there specifically to help you learn these things. Barbara has a different set of triggers. Everyone has their own manifestation of those triggers, but you're all working for the same goal, and that is aligning to compassion, wherein the voice of intuition is what guides you in any step, in any moment. That way, you understand when humans get into dangerous situations, when they get into disasters or storms or places where there's a huge community impact, yes, there's going to be deep emotion around it. What we want you to do is to take that emotion, don't deny it, breathe it, use it, detach from even the very worst of what you see, because that's going to help you with your own survival and thriving. That's good. It's going to help you anchor that synergy of compassion into the infrastructure of this birth that's taking place. And you have to going to go through having to let go. You're all still pretty absorbed in the culture. There's things you're going to find that you're going to have to let go of. But in the meantime, and in its place, is a new human who has compassion at their root. When Jesus was going through the worst of his experience, he asked everyone to forgive them because they didn't know what they were doing. They had no idea the power that story, that life was going to have through the ages. They had no idea. Forgive them. They're not aware. He even had no bias, no prejudice, nothing but ultimate love for the ones who were nailing him to the cross. He was a very evolved human being who spent many lives aligning to compassion to bring the message forward. And so here you are. We always like to tell people that what you resist persists. We don't want you to resist the idea that this might be the end of the world. We don't want you to resist that idea. We want you to explore that in your imagination with the intention to make peace with yourself, to make peace with your neighbors and your friends and all the other humans who have lived here, in the other lives you've lived, and those who you've shared the lens with, to detach, because that's part of this transformation as well, is how many humans can detach and let go and open up to compassion. When you go through that in your body, that possibility, you're not going to resist it. You're going to face the terror, perhaps. There's terror in there, maybe, and fear of the unknown and suffering, all those things, and feel and breathe them through that visioning and get to the point where you die. Well, that should be an exercise for every day. That should be something that you do regardless of if you're perched in World War III or not. The power of doing that is going to have an effect on the collective consciousness. So stay tuned for those things. And while you're not resisting World War III and you're saying, well, we could create that, but let's choose to do this over here. So once you can process your attachment and detach, and you could say, well, we could do that, but let's choose to do this. That's going to be more creative, more beneficial in the long run for the good of the whole, is to keep your love and keep your love of the miracle of your life. Just sitting in the chair, listening to our voice. It's a miracle. Love that. Love that you came here. Love that after you lose your bodies, there's a big party that's happening in afterlife where you're going to learn even more and get to celebrate like maybe you've never celebrated while you've been human, but we'll save that for later. That's not something that is different than any other day in the life of any other human. We're excited by your willingness to have these conversations, to go deeper, to help people understand how they can process these deep feelings practically being able to do a meditation where you let yourself feel watching the movie of the end of the world and pass yourself into the afterlife and out of the lens, and live with the commitment to the mystery and the unknown, and do those kinds of visualizations, because when you get back to your body, you're going to feel lighter, less attached, and more aligned to the good of the whole. So are there any questions or conversations you would like to have?
When you said about what you resist persists, and if we have the fear, I assume then that we're creating our own reality, our experience of the world, if we were to focus on that fear as opposed to detaching. So I was just wondering, as far as people seem to be divided in as far as fear-based and compassion-based, and as much as I would like to commit to the mystery, could you shed any light on any probable future events? For example, I've heard that there could be 2 timelines, well, each based on the choices that we're making. For example, some people will choose the fear-based and external solutions, and the other timeline is humans will be thriving, and because they've chosen to think of a more of a compassionate, connected vision of the world. Is that something in our future?
Yes, it's as if so many timelines are different than the others. There are people and places that will come together and transcend the separation lines because of the survival issues. We think it's probably good to remember that this long-term change that you're affecting, going through, that you are here going through this as things progress as they will, is really essential to the long-term projection of the regeneration of the species. If you don't see it happen, don't think for a minute that your place in this life, the placeholder that you came here to be, wasn't a part of that great change already in your life. Your own lives have changed. That's the most important piece. But now that you've done that, you can hold the space. You must know that whatever your experiences are that you have, yes, they're self-created, but they're not meant to be judged or biased or projected upon. If you end up in a very difficult situation, then you chose to come to be in that difficult situation, to transcend, to learn, to challenge yourself, to be that tool to say, intuition, tell me the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole. And you should be able, like a Genesis, to help rebuild in whatever way. And you're already doing that. But if the world does happen to come to a grinding halt, you'll have that, an all-important tool that so many others won't. And it will allow you to navigate magically through things that others can't. Not always, but for the most part. And leaving your example as an inspiration for others.
Thank you. That's why I feel so committed to this work.
Yes.
Hi, Jojo here. I've been watching the Harry Potter movies because we're taking Lydia to the play in Toronto next week or 2 weeks. I never got into them when they first came out, the books or the movies, but she's right into them. Holy crow. They are fascinating. And then I was reading The Coming Age of Miracles, and they used that J.K. Rowling's channeling, if you will, of these books as an example of bringing truth algorithms of what is possible and what is happening. And so these 3 young kids basically are facing evil and transforming it and changing timelines and dimensions and using magic. Any input about the Harry Potter works?
Well, that's the whole idea of what you're here to learn. We had talked at our last conversation about the mystery schools and how the activation of those lessons at a time when you were much more connected to nature during the mystery school trainings back in those days. The idea that even if the world is crashing and burning around you, you still have your intuition and you still have your creative power and you still have the ability to detach. And remember, we asked you also to put on your superhero attire so that when you're in that kind of maybe a critical situation, if you find yourself in, that you have that ability to function under pressure and without falling apart yourself, so that you can be a greater help to other people, like you're a trained EMT of some sort. There's a lot that you're learning that is in that similar fashion, certainly with a kind of metaphorical magic that you can have.
Thank you. We've all got our wands ready.
Yes. And we would like to remind you all that one of the reasons that we've been working with you all for all this time is to help you prepare for that moment of your death. Because we've stressed in the past that in that moment, when you let go, you have that opportunity to do an amazing detachment where you take as little attachment as possible with you into the afterlife. It gives you a cleaner, freer, more open energy when you do that. And sometimes you can't let go of everything, but the more life after life after life, after death after death after death, you're no longer just waking up into a cold, harsh environment like that description that Barbara read, painted that picture of early humanity waking up to their senses. No, this is a new humanity that has been through all that is implanting that knowledge and wisdom into the energy system. It's all chaotic, but it's certainly very well organized. And maybe that's a way to be able to see it, is that it's the ultimate paradox. You get to choose. That's what we can't stress enough. That you get to choose how you're going to respond, what you're going to do with your energy, how you're going to see things, how far you're going to go to learn the mastery of yourself and direct those intentions into visualizations of the manifestation of the good of the whole. And that's all you can do in a day, and it's a gracious plenty. And we're here with you every step of the way.
And that's a blessing.
We're going to close the channel by saying that these are weighty questions and deep conversations that need to be had. And we're honored to be invited and inspiring of them at this time. And know that the more that you commit to your own compassion, to being that self-loving, the more you're going to help anchor this synergy of love that's sometimes spread through adversity. You all know that. You've learned a fuller, deeper, richer way to love by going through adversity. But when did you ever fail to watch and be amazed? Namaste.